What would you think if I told you that the most profound professions of love are the ones that are never spoken? That there exists a silent, invisible language between two people, a current of truth that flows far beneath the surface of words. We live in a world that teaches women to listen for declarations, to wait for grand promises, to measure affection in hollow, sweet-sounding phrases. We're told that love announces itself loudly. But what if the loudest declarations are often the emptiest? What if true, deep, transformative love doesn't speak in words at all, but acts through the powerful, untamable force of the unconscious? Has this ever happened to you? You feel something profoundly real with a man, even when nothing has been said. A glance so deep it seems to stop time, making you forget where you are. A quiet, steady presence that feels more reassuring than any promise. A subtle sense that something monumental is unfolding, not between you and him, but inside of him because of you. This is the territory we're exploring today, guided by one of the greatest psychologists of all time, Carl Jung. He revealed that when a man truly loves, his mind enters a state beyond his control. It's a space where ancient, primordial patterns, which he called archetypes, begin to operate. It's where the ego, the carefully constructed mask he shows the world, is challenged, and a raw, undeniable truth begins to speak through expressions that simply cannot be faked. The tragedy is that so many women, conditioned by society, fail to recognize this silent language. They overlook the invisible yet unmistakable signs, and then they wonder why they keep falling for the wrong people, why they are so easily deceived by beautiful words that lack any real substance. So, how can you truly know when a man's love for you is real and deep? Join me on a journey into the silent language of the unconscious, a language that can only be read with intuition and a profound understanding of the human psyche. What I'm about to share could forever change the way you understand love, because when a man truly loves, the very first thing that happens is not an emotion, it's not a decision or a feeling of affection. It is an unconscious shift. Imagine a seismic wave, starting from the deepest layers of his soul, beginning to reverberate through his entire being. And the most terrifying part, for him, is that he cannot control it. He can't stop it, he can't reason with it, and he certainly can't fake it. Carl Jung identified this powerful phenomenon as the activation of archetypes. These aren't just ideas or personality traits. They are primordial, universal patterns that exist within what he called the collective unconscious of all humanity. Think of them as the original blueprints of the soul, a kind of spiritual DNA etched into every psychological cell we possess. They are not products of our logical mind, nor are they just social reflexes we've learned. They are ancient and powerful, and within every man's psyche there is a potent archetype called the lover. Now, this archetype doesn't stir for just anyone. It doesn't awaken because he's merely attracted to a beautiful face or a sharp wit. It doesn't get activated by an engaging conversation or even a night of intense physical intimacy. The lover, in its truest, most profound sense, at that moment, his ego, the part of him that is in control, that makes plans and maintains his identity, begins to tremble. It is directly threatened by the presence of someone who has touched the depths of his unconscious. Reason no longer holds the reins. The unconscious has taken the wheel. And when this happens, the man begins to change. Critically, he doesn't change to impress you. He changes because he can no longer continue to live as he once did. Your presence has made his old way of being impossible. Jung famously wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This is precisely what happens to a man in true love. He doesn't merely enter a relationship. He is forced to embark on an inner journey, a quest where his very self is placed under the microscope. He begins to see his own shortcomings, his deepest fears of abandonment, his unhealed memories, and all the parts of himself he has never named or faced. Therefore, for a man, true love is often not a state of blissful euphoria, but an intense inner struggle. And here lies the great paradox. A man who is truly, deeply in love often doesn't know how to express it. In fact, he may seem the opposite. You might encounter a man who becomes strangely cold, uncharacteristically silent, or even avoidant. And your first thought might be, he doesn't care, he's pulling away. But a Jungian perspective would suggest something entirely different. No, he's not indifferent. He is defending himself. He's shielding his ego from a psychological experience so vast, so overwhelming, that he hasn't yet developed the capacity to grasp it. When the archetype of the lover arises, a man is caught between two immense, opposing forces: the overwhelming desire to transcend his old self and enter into a sacred union with you, and the profound, primal fear of being hurt, of losing control, or of losing his very identity in the process. Jung described this as the ego wrestling with the unconscious. The social masks he wears, what Jung called the persona, are threatened, and the man is forced to be brutally honest with himself, perhaps for the first time. Think of a man who is typically stoic, fiercely independent, a man who always follows a plan and prides himself on his rationality. But since meeting you, he has become inconsistent. He forgets his own rigid principles. He does things that are completely out of character for him. This isn't because you've made him weak or foolish. It's because he is being swept into a new reality, a reality where his intuition is screaming louder than his reason, and where the pull of his soul is overriding the structures of his social conditioning. Jung believed that a man who truly loves undergoes a kind of psychological splitting. He is faced with a terrifying choice: either dive deeper into this profound connection and allow himself to be fundamentally transformed by it, or retreat back into the safety and familiarity of his ego. This is why you see some men who clearly love deeply, but they run away. It's not because they lack feelings. On the contrary, their feelings are so overwhelming that they lack the inner strength and courage to engage in the difficult process of what Jung called individuation, the journey of becoming whole that true love demands of them. So, according to Jung, true love is not just a simple emotion between two people. It is the beginning of a profound and often perilous inner journey. When a man loves, it is not just the relationship that is being tested. His very essence, his soul, is being called to transform. He begins to dream more vividly. He starts to feel things more deeply. He finds himself haunted by small details about you. And above all, he loses that comforting, familiar sense of control. This loss of control is the key. It explains why a man in the grip of true love can become clumsy, hesitant, or fall into a deep silence. It is not indifference. It is his psyche screaming in a language that has no words. And the most remarkable thing about this entire process is that he cannot fake it. Jung was adamant that the unconscious always reveals itself through unintentional behaviors, through the slips of the tongue, the unguarded expressions, the involuntary actions. It is in these unintentional expressions that the real truth resides. The man who truly loves you, then, is not the one who speaks the most, or promises the most, or performs the grandest gestures. He is the one whose actions are being driven by an inner force so powerful that they often defy his own reason. If you notice a man altering the entire rhythm of his life, restructuring his priorities from the ground up, showing up when you don't ask, remembering things you never expected him to, or simply looking at you as though he is seeing a missing part of himself that is not just chivalry or good manners, that is the unconscious at work. And when his actions no longer stem from calculated reason but from an inner pull he cannot resist, you will begin to see a trail of distinctive, since invisible yet consistent clues that the unconscious leaves on the surface of everyday life. These are not deliberate signals. They are the silent, irrefutable language of true love. Now, let's move to the most critical part, the part where we learn to read this silent language. If a man's soul has been captured, if his unconscious has been activated, how does it show up in the real world? It begins with the eyes. For if the soul is a profound, mysterious realm that words cannot truly touch, then the eyes are the windows through which the unconscious begins to whisper its secrets. Carl Jung often spoke of intuition as one of the 4 basic psychological functions, alongside thinking, feeling, and sensing. And nowhere on a man's body does the intuitive truth of his unconscious reveal itself more clearly or more honestly than in the way he looks at you. When a man truly loves, his gaze fundamentally changes. This is not the fleeting glance of conquest you might get from across a bar. It is not the instinctual, hungry look of raw desire. It is something else entirely. It is a focused, present, and deeply anchored stare, as if he is trying to memorize every contour of your being, not with his rational memory, but with his emotions, with his very soul. There is no plan behind this look, no hidden agenda. He simply cannot help but look. He is drawn to the sight of you. At a deeper psychological level, Jung explained that when the archetype of the lover awakens, a man's unconscious begins sending powerful signals outward through the most subtle and uncontrollable of his expressions, and the eyes are the most honest channel of all. You might catch him in a quiet moment, simply watching you when he thinks you're not paying attention. His gaze will be unhurried, unflinching, and soft. It's a gaze that seems to be seeking a connection with something far deeper than the physical surface, as if it's trying to communicate directly with your soul. Modern neuroscience has actually confirmed what Jung intuited a century ago. When we experience deep love or profound connection, our sympathetic nervous system becomes highly active. This causes our pupils to dilate, our heart rates to shift, and our gaze to literally anchor for longer periods on the person we love. This is a physiological reaction that cannot be consciously controlled or faked. A man may be a master of words, able to spin any story he chooses, but he cannot command the pupils of his eyes to constrict when they are looking at someone who has captivated his soul. They will dilate, involuntarily, revealing the truth his lips may be hiding. Have you ever encountered such a gaze? A look that makes you feel not just seen but truly felt? Not just observed but touched on an invisible, energetic level? This is what Jung would call the recognition of the soul. It's a moment that transcends simple attraction. It is the moment when a man does not merely see you, but sees the unformed, missing, or longed-for parts of himself reflected back in you. He sees his own potential, his own shadow, his own anima. And this is only the first, most immediate sign, because when a man truly begins to love, his entire being starts to realign itself to include you in the orbit of his life. This profound internal shift will manifest most clearly in a place you might not expect, in his relationship with time and space. This is the second, and perhaps most telling, unconscious sign. He restructures the very rhythm of his life to include you. Think about it. No one can pretend to love for long when that pretense requires them to consistently and fundamentally rearrange their life's established rhythm for someone else. It is simply too demanding, too inconvenient. This is precisely what Jung meant when he pointed out that the unconscious doesn't just manifest through fleeting emotions, it profoundly and irrevocably shapes our behavior. A man who is truly, deeply in love with you doesn't need to be prompted to show up. He doesn't seek you out only when he's bored or when his schedule conveniently opens up. He doesn't fit you into the empty corners of his life. Instead, he adjusts his entire rhythm, his routines, his work, his social schedule to be present with you. And he does this not because you demand it, not because it's what a good boyfriend is supposed to do, but because a force within him, his own unconscious, now compels him to. The desire to be with you is no longer a casual preference. It has become a psychological necessity. In his work in analytical psychology, Jung observed that when love originates from the deep well of the unconscious, it permeates and reshapes the entire conscious structure of a person's life. This means that true love isn't found in the grand dramatic words like, "I'll try to make time for you." It is found in the quiet, resolute, and consistent rearrangement of his daily existence. The clearest example might be a man with an incredibly demanding career. He's always busy, always on the go. Yet, he still sends a small, simple message every single morning, not a long-winded paragraph, but a consistent, timely check-in that says, "You are my first thought." Or perhaps he unhesitatingly cancels a long-planned hangout with his friends to take you to a doctor's appointment, even when you insisted you could go alone. These actions are not sacrifices in his mind. They are the natural, logical output of an inner universe that has fundamentally shifted its center of gravity. You are now at the core of that new orbit. And it's not just his time that changes. His use of space changes too. Jung noted that we unconsciously seek to close the physical distance with those who awaken deep emotions within us. Pay close attention to this. When you're in a crowded group, does he seem to stand just a little closer to you than to anyone else? In a group conversation, is his body, his torso, subtly turned toward you, even while he's speaking to someone else? Do his feet point in your direction? Does his hand just happen to accidentally rest on the table near yours? Does he slow his natural walking pace to match yours without seeming to notice he's doing it? This isn't some calculated flirting tactic he learned online. This is an unconscious force field. It is the pull of his soul being expressed through the language of his body, a language that cannot lie. And most importantly, all of this increased presence, this manipulation of time and space, is not just about being there. It is about protecting. Because when a man truly loves, he doesn't just show up in your life. He unconsciously becomes a silent guardian of your inner world. His body, without his conscious permission, begins to move inexorably toward you, a physical manifestation of an inner drive to connect and shield. A man can use his words to build walls, to conceal his emotions, to project an image of detached strength, but his body cannot lie. According to Jung, the unconscious does not reside solely in our dreams or in our vague, fleeting memories. It lives and breathes in every action, every subtle movement, every micro-reaction that our conscious ego cannot control. And one of the clearest arenas where the unconscious speaks its truth is in the management of physical distance between two people. When a man is truly falling in love, his body will unconsciously, almost magnetically, move toward you. In a crowded room, he will position himself closer to you than to others. His eyes will seek you out like a compass finding its true north. He may not even touch you, but you can feel it. Every muscle in his body seems to be resisting the urge to pull away from you. Jung emphasized that the ego may hide, it may posture, it may retreat, but the unconscious always moves toward where it senses life, where it senses connection, where it senses its missing piece. And when you are the spark of that life within him, no matter how much his rational mind might command him to keep his distance or play it cool, he is drawn to you by an invisible gravitational force. Have you noticed this? A man who is truly in love doesn't need to be holding your hand constantly. But when you walk into a room, the very space between the two of you seems to shrink, to become charged. He unconsciously closes the gap, not in an effort to control or possess you, but because his inner self is seeking to merge the space that separates you. A slight, seemingly accidental brush of his arm as he passes by. A hand gently, briefly placed on the small of your back as you navigate a crowd together. His eyes tracking you as you move across the room. These are not mere acts of social chivalry or politeness. They are profound signals of an unconscious connection that is taking physical shape. It is his body speaking for his heart. And pay attention to this as well. His very response to touch begins to change. A brief, casual hug might cause his breathing to slow down. A light, fleeting touch on his arm might make him pause, his eyes softening for a moment. This isn't because he's never touched a woman before. It's because with you, touch becomes something else. It transcends the physical and becomes a primal channel of communication, a direct line to his soul, bypassing words entirely. Jung believed that when love stems from the deep, authentic well of the unconscious, it revives emotions that have been dulled and suppressed by societal conditioning. It makes a person feel more alive, more rawly sensitive, and more beautifully vulnerable than they have ever been. And this new, profound sensitivity isn't just physical. It seeps into his mind and begins to rewire the very architecture of his memory, not in a rational, organized way, but in a strangely profound one. His mind develops a selective memory, where you are the one detail that can never be erased. This leads us to another powerful silent sign. He remembers everything you say. Not the big things, not the important dates you've told him to remember. He remembers the small things. The insignificant, throwaway details you mentioned once in passing and likely forgot yourself moments later. But then one day, weeks or even months later, he'll recall them with startling precision, bringing them up naturally, without any fanfare. Perhaps it's the name of the strange dish you loved as a child, or a particular movie scene that always makes you cry, or the name of your childhood pet that you mentioned in one brief story. He remembers, even though you never asked him to. Carl Jung pointed out that our most enduring memories are not forged through willpower or conscious effort. They are imprinted upon us through powerful emotional connections, etched into our psyche by the unconscious. In other words, this kind of emotional memory doesn't come from trying. It comes from being deeply touched on the level of the soul. When a man is truly falling in love, his brain begins to change how it filters information. Suddenly, things related to you, even the most trivial, are given top priority in his memory bank. He's not consciously making flashcards or trying to memorize facts about you to impress you later. It's that his unconscious has already recognized you as deeply significant, as profoundly meaningful, and so anything associated with you is automatically flagged as important. This is a proven psychological mechanism. The brain's limbic system, which processes our emotions, plays a critical role in the formation of long-term memory. But what's so remarkable here is not just that he remembers, but how he acts on that memory. You might casually mention that you hate the sound of ticking clocks when you're trying to sleep. A week later, you stay over and you notice the small clock that was on his nightstand is gone. A man can use his words to build walls, to conceal his emotions, to project an image of detached strength, but his body cannot lie. According to Jung, the unconscious does not reside solely in our dreams or in our vague, fleeting memories. It lives and breathes in every action, every subtle movement, every micro-reaction that our conscious ego cannot control. And one of the clearest arenas where the unconscious speaks its truth is in the management of physical distance between two people. When a man is truly falling in love, his body will unconsciously, almost magnetically, move toward you. In a crowded room, he will position himself closer to you than to others. His eyes will seek you out like a compass finding its true north. He may not even touch you, but you can feel it. Every muscle in his body seems to be resisting the urge to pull away from you. Jung emphasized that the ego may hide, it may posture, it may retreat, but the unconscious always moves toward where it senses life, where it senses connection, where it senses its missing piece. And when you are the spark of that life within him, no matter how much his rational mind might command him to keep his distance or play it cool, he is drawn to you by an invisible gravitational force. Have you noticed this? A man who is truly in love doesn't need to be holding your hand constantly. But when you walk into a room, the very space between the two of you seems to shrink, to become charged. He unconsciously closes the gap, not in an effort to control or possess you, but because his inner self is seeking to merge the space that separates you. A slight, seemingly accidental brush of his arm as he passes by. A hand gently, briefly placed on the small of your back as you navigate a crowd together. His eyes tracking you as you move across the room. These are not mere acts of social chivalry or politeness. They are profound signals of an unconscious connection that is taking physical shape. It is his body speaking for his heart. And pay attention to this as well. His very response to touch begins to change. A brief, casual hug might cause his breathing to slow down. A light, fleeting touch on his arm might make him pause, his eyes softening for a moment. This isn't because he's never touched a woman before. It's because with you, touch becomes something else. It transcends the physical and becomes a primal channel of communication, a direct line to his soul, bypassing words entirely. Jung believed that when love stems from the deep, authentic well of the unconscious, it revives emotions that have been dulled and suppressed by societal conditioning. It makes a person feel more alive, more rawly sensitive, and more beautifully vulnerable than they have ever been. And this new, profound sensitivity isn't just physical. It seeps into his mind and begins to rewire the very architecture of his memory, not in a rational, organized way, but in a strangely profound one. His mind develops a selective memory, where you are the one detail that can never be erased. This leads us to another powerful, silent sign. He remembers everything you say. Not the big things, not the important dates you've told him to remember. He remembers the small things. The insignificant, throwaway details you mentioned once in passing and likely forgot yourself moments later. But then one day, weeks or even months later, he'll recall them with startling precision, bringing them up naturally, without any fanfare. Perhaps it's the name of the strange dish you loved as a child, or a particular movie scene that always makes you cry, or the name of your childhood pet that you mentioned in one brief story. He remembers, even though you never asked him to. Carl Jung pointed out that our most enduring memories are not forged through willpower or conscious effort. They are imprinted upon us through powerful emotional connections, etched into our psyche by the unconscious. In other words, this kind of emotional memory doesn't come from trying. It comes from being deeply touched on the level of the soul. When a man is truly falling in love, his brain begins to change how it filters information. Suddenly, things related to you, even the most trivial, are given top priority in his memory bank. He's not consciously making flashcards or trying to memorize facts about you to impress you later. It's that his unconscious has already recognized you as deeply significant, as profoundly meaningful, and so anything associated with you is automatically flagged as important. This is a proven psychological mechanism. The brain's limbic system, which processes our emotions, plays a critical role in the formation of long-term memory. But what's so remarkable here is not just that he remembers, but how he acts on that memory. You might casually mention that you hate the sound of ticking clocks when you're trying to sleep. A week later, you stay over and you notice the small clock that was on his nightstand is gone. You never asked him to move it. You never mentioned it again. Or you talk about a book you adored as a teenager. A month later, you see it sitting on his bookshelf, placed there as if it's a natural extension of you. There are no reminders needed, no tests required. It's because once you've entered the deepest emotional field of his psyche, everything about you becomes sacred data, stored without the need for any rational filtering. Jung might have called this a form of spiritual embodiment. It's when someone doesn't just remember facts about you. You become an active part of their ongoing psychological structure. You begin to exist not in their phone or their calendar, but in their very subconscious. And when you begin to live inside a man's unconscious, the next step is inevitable. He begins to lower his walls. He starts to let you see the parts of him that the rest of the world is never, ever allowed to witness. This is perhaps one of the most sacred signs of all. He lowers the armor of his ego around you. A man may be stoic and stern with the world. He may have built a fortress around his heart to navigate the challenges of life. But if one day he quietly rests his head on your shoulder in a moment of weariness, or if he stumbles through his words trying to share an emotion he can't name, you are witnessing something profoundly rare. You are witnessing the vulnerability of the masculine ego. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But to become one's true self, one must first dare to remove every mask, especially the mask of strength and invincibility that society has placed on men since they were boys." When a man truly loves, the psychological walls of his defense, the armor he has spent a lifetime building, begin to crack. And this doesn't happen because he has grown weak. It happens because you have touched a hidden, sensitive region of his soul, a place that only the unconscious can lead to. Jung called this place the shadow. The shadow is the part of ourselves that we have rejected, suppressed, and hidden away, not just from the world, but from ourselves. It holds our insecurities, our past traumas, our perceived failures, but it also holds our deepest potential for transformation and wholeness. Don't expect this vulnerability to always look like a dramatic confession or a flood of tears. It often appears in much quieter moments. It might be in the quiet of an evening when he shares a story about how his father once belittled him, a story he's never told anyone else. It might be when you see him pause and his eyes grow distant at the mention of a dream he long ago abandoned. When a man shows you an unhealed wound, he is not asking for you to fix it. He is placing the most fragile part of himself in your hands, an act of supreme trust. In the psychic economy of a man, revealing weakness is often considered the ultimate taboo. But when he loves you deeply enough, his protective mechanisms begin to crumble, and the real, unadorned, and sometimes broken person begins to emerge from behind the mask. He no longer fears you seeing his flaws. His greater fear is that you will never see his true self. This is a profoundly sacred moment in any connection. Jung believed that it is only in the safe, accepting space of a true soul connection that the shadow dares to step into the light to be seen. When a man loves you enough to shed the heavy armor of his ego, it's not just love, it's a form of rebirth. And when he becomes brave enough to be this honest and this real with you, something else beautiful and inevitable begins to emerge. He starts to actively weave you into every corner of his life. There are no more boundaries, no more private spaces he needs to protect from you. He wants you to be a part of his world, and so you become a part of his life. When a man truly loves you with the force of his unconscious, he doesn't just want to be near you. He wants you to belong in his world, not as a temporary guest or a plus one, but as a natural, permanent extension of himself. Carl Jung might have called this the process of psychological assimilation. It's a state where another person is not just emotionally connected to you, but is recognized by your psyche as a fundamental part of your very being. For men, this is especially significant. Society often teaches them to compartmentalize their keep work, friends, family, and romance in separate, tidy boxes. But when the unconscious is awakened by true love, those carefully constructed walls begin to blur and dissolve. You begin to appear, naturally and effortlessly, in spaces he once kept completely to himself. You won't have to angle for an invitation or drop hints about wanting to meet his friends. He will introduce you to them as a matter of course, without hesitation, fanfare, or ambiguity. He'll do it because it feels like the most natural thing in the world. You may have only been together for a few weeks, but you're invited to a family barbecue or to join him in a monthly ritual he has with his oldest friends. He's not doing this to prove anything to you or to them. He's doing it because his unconscious has already woven you into his vision of his life. A clear example of this is when a man introduces you to his closest friend, the one he shares his deepest, most unfiltered thoughts with. This isn't just a social courtesy to please you. It is an unconscious acknowledgement to the world and to himself that you are one of his own, that you belong in his inner circle. Jung emphasized that we bring truly significant people into our intimate circles not to show them off, but for them to bear witness to the vital role they now play in our inner world. You will also notice this sign in the very language he uses. He will effortlessly, unconsciously, start saying we instead of I. He'll talk about his weekend plans and say, "We should check out that new market." Or tell a story about his week and say, "And then we watched that show." This isn't a conscious choice. It's his language reflecting a new, unconscious state of being. He no longer sees himself as an entirely independent, solitary entity. Simple plans, like where to travel in the summer, what to watch on a Friday night, or even what kind of new sofa to buy for the living room, suddenly include you in their vision. And most importantly, he doesn't feel a sense of loss in this merging. He doesn't feel trapped or that he's losing his freedom. On the contrary, he feels more complete. Jung described true love as a kind of return. The other person is not just an object of affection, they are the missing piece in the architecture of our own soul. When a man realizes this on a deep, unconscious level, he stops guarding his separate spaces. He shares his life with you, not out of a sense of duty, but out of a natural, irresistible urge to make his world whole. And when this integration runs so deep that he no longer sees himself as a separate entity in the present, his mind naturally begins to project this new reality, this new we, into the future. This reveals another crucial sign. He mentions you in his visions of the future. A man can love you in the present moment but still, consciously or unconsciously, place you outside the frame of his future. This is a painful truth that many people try to avoid facing, but Jung didn't shy away from it. He believed that someone who truly loves you doesn't just live in the present with you. They begin to unconsciously rebuild their entire future with you at its center. When love erupts from the unconscious, it doesn't just alter your present emotions, it shifts the entire map of time in a man's mind. He no longer thinks of his future as an independent concept. Everything he imagines, everything he plans, every dream he has for the years to come, now unconsciously carries your shadow, your presence. You will not need to press him with anxious questions like, "Where is this going?" or "When are you going to get serious?" Because when a man's love is this real, your presence in his future isn't a decision he has to make. It's a natural, foregone conclusion. He'll be talking about a winter trip he wants to take next year and use the word we instead of I. He might be discussing a potential career change or a move to a new city, and he'll ask for your opinion not as a courtesy, but because he genuinely sees you as part of that equation. He'll reveal it in casual, offhand remarks, distant gazes into space followed by a soft, "Someday, I want to live by the sea with you and have a garden." This act of future casting reveals something critical. You have entered the unconscious strategy of his life. A man who truly loves you doesn't need to write out his life plan on a whiteboard to prove his commitment. He reveals it in these small, unguarded moments. And crucially, he isn't afraid of this vision. There is no avoidance, no hesitation, no palpable sense of being trapped. On the contrary, the thought of a future with you brings him a sense of peace and rightness, because you are not a temporary lover. You are the activated anima in his unconscious, the missing part of himself he wants to hold on to in order to become a more complete version of himself. And when a man places you at the very heart of his future, one final, powerful instinct is certain to follow. He will begin to act on an instinct to protect you, without you ever asking, without you ever needing to remind him. Because your safety, both physical and emotional, has now become a sacred mandate from deep within his soul. This is the final and perhaps most primal sign. He cannot bear to see you hurt. Have you ever felt a man's gaze on you? Not a gaze of possessive desire, but one of quiet, aching concern when you're tired, or hurt, or just silent. Have you felt his steady, silent presence as if he would take on all of your pain himself if only he could. Not every man is capable of loving at this depth. But when one does, you will know it, because his actions will no longer come from his will, but from pure, unthinking instinct. Carl Jung might have called this the activation of the guardian archetype. It's a psychological structure buried deep in the masculine unconscious, awakened only when a man meets someone who touches the most fragile, precious part of his own soul. When this happens, protecting you is no longer a conscious act of chivalry. It becomes a reflex, as involuntary as breathing. Have you seen a man, busy as he is, call you back the very moment he sees your text that just says, "I'm not feeling okay"? Or a man who is notoriously bad at comforting people, but still fumbles to try and make you smile, even just a little, because the sight of your sadness tightens his own heart in a way he can't fully understand or explain. Jung said that this is the formation of a true unconscious bond, where you are no longer just someone special to him. You are a living, breathing part of his own emotional core. Jung emphasized that we don't truly care for someone until their pain activates the compassionate parts of our own shadow. This means a man who truly loves you doesn't just want to shield you from external harm, like a bodyguard. He wants to help heal the wounds you hide inside. He may not speak poetic words of comfort, but he will sit silently beside you when you feel overwhelmed and want no one else around. He'll listen without judgment when you talk about a difficult part of your past. He will remember the things that make you anxious, not so he can control you, but so he can avoid hurting you further. And most importantly, he doesn't do any of this to earn your love or to score points. He does it because if you are hurting, he cannot rest. If you are anxious, he cannot be at peace. If you cry, he feels a profound sense of helplessness. This is not because he is weak, but because his heart has placed you in the most sacred, protected space of his unconscious. Jung believed that true love always comes with a sense of spiritual responsibility. A man who loves you this sincerely won't ask, "What do you need me to do?" He will already know what to do, because the connection has surpassed rational control. You are no longer just a lover to him. You have become one of the missions of his life. When love operates at such a profound, silent, and instinctual level, not everyone is attuned enough to recognize it when it happens. And sadly, many people, even when standing face to face with a love this genuine, end up losing it, blinded by the confusing haze between what is real and what is merely a beautiful illusion. This is when we must pause and learn to unmask the dazzling but deceptive facades that so often lead us astray from the truth. If you're still with me on this journey, I want to offer my deepest thanks. Journeying together through the complex depths of human psychology is never easy, and now it's time for us to face the most challenging part of all, the dangerous and beautiful misconceptions about love that keep so many of us lost. There is a bitter paradox in love that few dare to face. Many people fail to recognize true, profound love, even when it is standing clearly and quietly right in front of them. Instead, they find themselves clinging to dazzling but hollow signals, chasing dramatic but empty behaviors, and calling this chaos passion or destiny. Jung once warned, "The creative mind plays with the object it loves." And in the realm of love, it is these powerful, self-created illusions that cause so many to miss the rare chance to encounter a connection that is deep, authentic, and truly transformative. One of the greatest and most seductive misconceptions is the belief that true love must always come with an intense, overwhelming, almost painful fervor. The constant, urgent messages, the late-night calls filled with drama, the fiery bouts of jealousy, followed by passionate reconciliations. All of these things create the powerful illusion that this love is earth-shattering and therefore significant. But from a Jungian perspective, we must ask a different, more difficult question. Is this truly love, or is it merely the chaotic, reactive collision of two immature and wounded egos. Because in the deep, unconscious experience Jung describes, true love does not shatter you, it deepens you. It does not breed constant anxiety and doubt. It opens up a space of profound inner peace, a sacred ground where you don't have to constantly struggle to be loved, where you don't have to fight to prove your worth, and where you don't have to battle to keep the other person's presence in your life. Many of us have been taught that if a man doesn't say, "I love you," every single day, if he doesn't make grand promises about the future, or if he doesn't post photos of you all over his social media, then it must not be true love. But this is perhaps the most insidious trap of all. Jung pointed out that the things that appear most loudly and performatively on the surface are often the ego's desperate attempt to mask a deeper, more frightening emptiness. A man who texts you, "I love you," 10 times a day, but vanishes the moment you truly need him isn't loving you. He is in love with the performance of love, with his own fleeting and dramatic emotions. In stark contrast, the man who quietly comes over to fix your car because he knows you're stressed about money, without ever saying a word about it, may be caring for you on a level that words could never touch. He is pouring his love into concrete actions rather than flaunting it outwardly for applause. Another dangerous misconception is equating love with desire. Our modern society relentlessly places physical attraction and sexual chemistry at the very center of what we call love. But Jung made a clear and critical distinction. Desire is a powerful, instinctual phenomenon, while love is a profound psychological process. A man can desire you with an intensity that takes your breath away, yet remain entirely void of any real soul connection to you. He wants your body, but he doesn't truly see you. He touches your skin, but he fails to reach the loneliness in your heart. True love, as Jung defined it, is the process by which another person becomes a mirror, helping us to finally recognize and become ourselves. It is not a tool to satisfy our fleeting biological urges. And if you consistently feel empty or used after moments of intimacy, if you find yourself quietly wondering, "Does he even care about who I am?" you already have your answer. Your soul knows the difference. Many also confuse superficial attention with deep, unwavering commitment. He remembers your birthday and sends a beautiful bouquet of flowers. He speaks sweet words and masters the art of the compliment. But when you face a real-life crisis, he disappears, you lose your job, and he goes silent. You're consumed with anxiety about a family issue, and he offers a hollow, "I don't know what to say." In analytical psychology, Jung called this the personate social mask that we all construct to function effectively in the external world. A man can become an expert at playing the part of the ideal lover, saying all the right things and performing all the right gestures, but lack the emotional maturity and inner substance to be a true companion when life becomes complex and messy. True love, as Jung affirmed, does not shy away from crisis. It becomes clearer, stronger, and more undeniable in those raw moments of human vulnerability. And then there is one of the most common and enduringly painful mistakes of all, believing that true love will finally arrive if you just love him enough. So many women burn themselves out trying to hold on to a man who is emotionally unavailable or unwilling to meet them halfway. They endure disrespect, they forgive betrayals, they sacrifice their own needs, and they wait in a state of weary, draining hope. They tell themselves, "If I'm just a little better, if I'm more patient, if I love him more perfectly, he will change. He will see my worth." But Carl Jung warned of this destructive pattern early on. The more you sacrifice yourself for someone else, the more you feed their shadow, their entitlement, their immaturity, their lack of accountability, rather than awakening their light. True love does not require you to destroy yourself. It demands that you become a stronger, more whole version of yourself, and that the other person chooses to walk that path of growth with you, not because of what you do for them, but because of who you are. And the most terrifying truth behind all of this is that the most beautiful illusions are the ones that blind us to the most painful realities. Jung said that the unconscious never lies, but the conscious mind is a master of deception. It can and will distort every signal it receives to avoid facing its deepest fears: the fear of abandonment, the fear of being unloved, the fear of being truly alone. This is why so many people, despite receiving clear, undeniable signs that the other person's love isn't genuine, will persist in drowning themselves in hope. They aren't in love with the actual person standing before them. They are in love with the expectation of that person. They are in love with the story they have imagined, not the flawed, real human being in front of them. So, how do we escape these gilded cages of misconception? Jung offered no simple formula, but he gave us one golden principle: listen to the darkness. The darkness is not evil. The darkness is your intuition. It's that quiet, deep place inside you where you just know something is wrong, even if you can't logically articulate why. It's that sinking feeling in your stomach when his actions don't match his words. It's the feeling of yourself shrinking, of losing your energy, of constantly doubting your own sanity, even when the outside world tells you that you have a perfect relationship. When your intuition tells you that this is not true love, do not rush to silence it with excuses. True love does not cause prolonged, agonizing doubt. It does not make you feel crazy. It does not force you to play the part of the easygoing girl just to be kept around. It does not strip you of your freedom, your individuality, or your inner voice. True love, though it may be quiet, is the space where you can be your fullest, most authentic self and still be loved. A man who truly loves you will not leave you constantly questioning his feelings. His unconscious has already spoken through his gaze, his actions, and his steady, protective presence. If you see none of that, it's not because you're blind. It is because the love you are looking for is not there. Carl Jung didn't teach us to find love with strategies or games. He taught us to look straight into our own darkness, into the places where our unhealed wounds still linger, where our ego tries to control everything, where we fear being hurt so deeply that we settle for empty relationships just to avoid the silence of being alone. But true love doesn't arise from avoidance. It grows only when you are brave enough to step through the illusions and see what is truly happening beneath the surface of what seems like love. You may discover that the person who kept you awake for countless nights was merely an illusion your own unconscious painted to fill a void. And you may realize that the quiet, steady person who has been standing by your side all this time is the one who has been loving you with their entire being. And perhaps then, for the first time, you will be still enough to hear the whisper of your own soul, and it will say, "I deserve a love that is deeper, truer, and more real than anything I have ever known before." Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss our next content. Goodbye.